Hey everybody, what's up? How we doing? It is me, Legal Vices, and it is Monday, and that can only mean one thing. That means it is Maritime Monday, where we share maritime stories. And we'll talk about this. We'll talk about today's story in just a little bit. But first, we've had a lot of activity before I even got here. And among those activities was our very first super chat. Fondian's kicking us off with a $10 super chat right out of the gate. Well, this is actually before we got out of the gate. So thank you very, very much. Keep up the good work. I love listening as I drive cross country. That's absolutely amazing. That's the kind of thing I like to hear. That's what I love to hear. It's not just the people that are here watching on YouTube actively and or paying attention and contributing in the chat. I like to hear there's people out there that just have this on as background noise as they're driving around the country, because that's kind of how I fell in love with AM radio, and that's sort of how I'm patterning my channel, sort of after the old AM radio, overnight AM radio, things like Art Bell, Coast to Coast, AM, things like that, where you just talk to people, you listen to stories, you talk to people, and you hopefully provide some entertainment along the way. So thank you very much for that super chat, Fondy. That is deeply, deeply appreciated. Kicking us off before the show gets out of the way, and also Xcomer, before we started, gifted 5 memberships. A little bit of an early bird special there for those of you that were hanging out in the chat before it started. You may have been one of the lucky 5 that got a membership from Xcomer. Thank you so much. And if you did, I hope you thanked him for that. Deeply, deeply appreciated. Wow. We got a few things to cover today. This is a big story. And as always, for Maritime Monday, I try to ask you to please kindly keep no spoilers. Be wary of spoiler alerts in the channel. Because this, some of you may have never heard the story before. Some of you may be experts in it. Some of you may know more about it than I do, which is probably likely if you know much about it. But we have people here that have never heard this story, and this is an amazing story. And so I ask you to be wary of spoiler alerts for what happens as we go through the story. That's just kind of our standard Maritime Monday spoiler alert. Now, the usual rules apply. We've got 148 concurrent viewers and 74 likes. Again, it is always 50% of you that are not doing your job. So get over there, hit that like button. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button, and by the way, I beg you, if you are subscribed to this channel, please look down there and make sure that you are still subscribed to this channel. Why do I say that? Why do I particularly say that today? Because overnight, for no reason that seems reasonable whatsoever, 25 subs just vanished into the air. Ordinarily, there's people that drop off, but it's usually a gradual thing, like 1 or 2, every so many hours, or 1 or 2 every day. This was just in the space of a couple of hours, 25 subscriptions just disappeared. So those of you that haven't subscribed, I would love it if you'd do me the favor of subscribing to the channel. And again, if you are subscribed to the channel, please double check. Make sure you are still subscribed. And just so Jack, Matt, and others are not confused, this is not my Village People hat. This is a Polish sea captain's hat. This is a Polish fisherman boat captain's hat, straight from Poland, from the company Sturkowski that makes Polish fisherman captain's hats. So there you go. That's the Maritime Monday hat. Okay, we got that going. Just want to disabuse you of any of those Village People notions. We've got our mods here. We're doing great. And we have a lot of you members here. If you haven't subscribed to the memberships, we have 3 memberships layers available to you if you want to do that. And as we go through, super chats are the best way to get my attention, to make sure I respond and address your issues. I try to look at the chat as much as I possibly can and get to some of the ones that seem to be important, but I can't always do that because we're doing so many other things here at the same time. So super chats, that will make sure and guarantee that I read it and respond. Speaking of super chats, what's coming up tomorrow? Tomorrow, what is coming up is an update on the Taylor ship business, chopping up the boyfriend and leaving his head and other parts of his body in a bucket, and various other parts scattered around the house and neighbors. So we'll do an update on that tomorrow, as well as going back over The super chats from the F it Friday drunken booze stream. I still owe you guys 15 shots. I tapped out after, I believe, 26 by my count. I owe you 15 shots and a really large number of super chats that I either know I missed or don't remember reading. So uh, that'll be tomorrow. We'll do a catch up on the super chat and as much of the drink stream part of it as we can get through. Plus, we'll be doing the update on the Taylor Ship business trial. Mr. K says, ironically, I know quite a bit about Ernest Shackleton. This is probably the only story you'll ever do that I have an understanding of. Well, good. And after the events we talk about happen, please feel free to add some additional details in the chats, but not before, because we want to limit the spoilers. Now, with that in mind, what's coming up this week? It's the weekend preview. Tomorrow, as I said, is the super chat and the cashing in on some of the 15 shots that are owed, and the Taylor Ship business update. Wednesday, we'll be looking at probably a special show. A fairly special show. We'll see how that goes. There's something in the works. But unless or until that happens, we will be doing sovereign citizens. The Brooks trial kind of created this interest in sovereign citizens. Who are they? What do they believe? I saw that so often in the chats of the various channels I was on. So we're going to look at some basic sovereign citizen beliefs, as well as reading from a manual. It's a trial survival guide, and see how much of that that Daryl Brooks followed in one way or another. Stingy says Farron was doing you dirty by letting you read ones over. She didn't realize they were duplicates. As liquored up as I was, I figured out that you all were screwing with my brain by sending me identical chats before the sober one figured it out. So, hey. Are you going to cover the suitcase murder girl? I think her last name is Boone. As a matter of fact, probably Friday. Either Friday or Tuesday, we will be doing her full interrogation video. So I plan on getting up to speed on the suitcase murder chick. So that will be coming up, as well as a couple of other things that are in the works. And Thursday, as always, is O.J. Simpson Day. We're still with Mark Furman, the racist cop who may or may not have planted evidence. And then Friday, like I said, we'll either be doing the suitcase murder chick interrogation video or something a little bit different. And there will also probably be a Friday evening unexplained stream. So that's the weekend preview. And with that, we have a lot of ground to cover here today, because the Shackleton story is a 3-layer story. There's 3 separate main parts to this story. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these parts of the story. And then next week, we will have a viewing party it's an 1.5 hour long documentary about the Shackleton expedition. To me, I mean, this is such an amazingly cool story. This is such an amazing, tragic accident, a soul-crushing maritime adventure that that ends up in this amazing fight for survival against the elements, against everything that the nature and your being can throw at you. And then there's also some happiness that comes out of it. So that'll be next week. So we'll do the background chat things today. We'll do the background information today, and then next Monday we will watch this 1.5 hour long documentary that's narrated by Liam Neeson, as we deep dive, so to speak, in the Shackleton expedition. So that's where we're going to be. We'll be doing that this week, and then the documentary next week. And then following that on the 21st, we're going to be doing some sea shanties, history and purpose of sea shanties, and going over some of my favorite sea shanties. I wish I was drunk. You are still on your break, I take it. Congratulations. Thank you so much for the super chat. How are we? We are great. And we just got a meme copium raid too. Meme just raided here. If Meme is actually here, Meme, I don't know if you came over here, but I need to talk to you about a future stream that I desperately need you to be involved in. So coming up soon, hopefully there will be a collaboration with Meme Copium here on this channel. So thank you for the meme raid. It's great to have all of you here. Please make sure you hit that like button. There's 300 of you here now. 144 have hit the like button. Again, that's half of you. Everybody get down there, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, super chat me, and let's get into this as we read Flux. Oh, by the way, Flux, she just dropped a new video on her channel today. Kind of a little bit of the Flux origin story. And she said a few nice things on there about me. So deeply appreciate that, Flux. To be fair, I didn't realize they were doubled either. Haha, love you, Panther Prison. Always love Maritime Mondays. Panther, I'm about ready to go to prison. It's pretty chilly in this room tonight. So yeah. Oh, Irish, I was broke. No break. I am hungover, so skipped college. Spoken like a true Irishman. That's the blood of my people coursing through Irish I was drunk's veins there. All righty. The first part of tonight's Maritime Monday of 4 parts. I said 3 of the Shackleton. There's an additional part where we're going to start off by reading Maritime Monday hate mail. Yes, we got Maritime Monday hate mail. Well, it's not really hate mail. This is from a viewer, James PFP, regarding the video I uploaded earlier today about the Flying Dutchman. The video you're using as a quote source/seed. Alrighty, in the first 60 seconds, I've already got 3 major criticisms of this video on the Flying Dutchman. 1, the voiceover narrator sounds like he wants a gerb on the television working for a cable network, so he's not even a real person, or he's a complete and utter moron. Yeah, but the video is kind of fun. Can't argue with that. And B, remember Scooby-Doo because it referenced Scooby-Doo, and then there was parts of Flying Dutchman on Scooby-Doo. Remember Scooby-Doo? Yeah, and I also remember that Scooby-Doo is a cartoon, not history. When cartoons provide you the best proof, perhaps you're intentionally lowering the gullibility bar, and or you're rather be gaslighting than anything else. I think it's funny that he mentioned Scooby-Doo as being his problem, not to mention the 50% of the video dealt with Pirates of the Caribbean in Johnny Depp. It's all in fun. And one specific piece of bad grammar that indicates exactly how low rent and low bar this video is found at 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Flying Dutchman has seen the most frequent ocean by countless vessels. So yeah, the most frequented is not explicitly named, and the countless vessels number has been inflated by references to Scooby-Doo, but no other documentation. Jeff, are you trying to entertain 10-year-olds? Too long, didn't read, not even unintentionally funny. Okay. You've missed the point. It's a story about a literal ghost ship. If you believe in a ship, like a spirit ship that's been floating out around the oceans for 300 years, probably, it's not history. There was a little bit of a historical wrapping around it. But the idea is to present a story about an actual ship that has been reported as a ghost for over the past 300 years. It was all in fun. It's fun. It's lighthearted. It starts out with Scooby-Doo. It involves Johnny Depp and the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just, the whole purpose is just to say there's stories of ghost ships out there. Don't take it too seriously. We had fun. So that was the fan mail I got today. I thought it was kind of funny. Sapien Underground, my liver can't even, yet here I am, cam girl. Sapien Underground, we're going to be reading a lot of your super chats tomorrow because we skipped a lot of yours. You were bringing them in fast and furious. So tune in tomorrow when we read your super chats and talk a little bit more. Xcomer says, since we're on the topic of mail, daily reminder to get a post box. Yep, that's going to happen later this week, I hope. AA Ron says, are we discussing the Northwest Passage today? If so, Dan Vask did a really good metal cover of the song. We're not going to talk about the Northwest Passage today. We might get around to that in a few weeks, but keep you in mind and keep the metal dude. Do a stream with your angry emails. I only get them like once a month. I mean, that's like the angriest one I've gotten for a very long time, and it wasn't even angry. I thought it was just kind of funny. So, all right, that's part 1. Part 1 is done. The fan mail section is over. Lighten up. Am I trying to entertain 10-year-olds? No, I'm trying to entertain people that are lighthearted and have a sense of humor. So, okay. With that, we're going to move into the Shackleton expedition, which again is an amazing, amazing adventure story. You could not write a movie script that had this much adventure into it. I mean, it would just be too much. It would be an over the top action type movie. And HTT, we're not talking about the backdoor passage ever. Uh, Max Moore in the house. Hey, Max. At Flux, can the moderators post your channel? I found it via search and just subscribed. Mods can do that. Flux is a mod. She can post her own channel. All right, here we go. For those of you that don't know about Ernest Shackleton's adventure on the aptly entitled ship, the Endurance, that's what we're going to get into today. What happened to Shackleton, his team members, and the vessel, the Endurance?
Ernest Shackleton was an Irish explorer. He's also the ultimate model for crisis management, which he became when his 1914 expedition met with what can only be described as complete and utter disaster. Their trip to the Antarctic showed the sheer magnitude of Shackleton's inspirational journey and has made him a pop culture icon of bravery and leadership. Today, we're going to take a look at what happened when explorer Ernest Shackleton was stranded in the Antarctic for years. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other badass explorers you would like to hear about. Okay, bundle up because we are headed south. Way south. Roald Amundsen and Robert Scott had already reached the South Pole in 1914. So if Ernest Shackleton was going to leave his mark, he'd have to do something else. Eventually, he decided to attempt the first continental crossing of Antarctica. The trip was so lengthy, Shackleton would need two teams to complete it. One would leave from South America, the other would leave from Tasmania and land on the opposite side of the continent, along the Ross Sea. Since the South American party wouldn't be able to carry enough supplies to make it completely across, the Tasmania party would have to cross nearly a third of the whole continent just to set up the necessary supply depot. It wasn't a terrible plan, in theory, but the whole thing was rendered moot by Shackleton's failure to even reach Antarctica.
Okay, so this sounds like an utter and absolute failure of humankind, doesn't it? He plans on having this major expedition to be the first to cross the South Pole, and he doesn't even get there. Well, that's what the story's about. What happened, and why are we making a video? Why are we doing a show about a failure? Now, the interesting thing about this is it's a modern, relatively modern story. And he was documenting every step of this. So we have the actual photographs. We have actual video, like video film. We have actual film from the expedition. So that's what kind of makes this even more powerful. We're not just talking stories here. We're looking at the actual people. We're looking at the actual, the actions that were involved. Or we're watching these people move and breathe and talk. And by the way, while I'm thinking about that, this week is the anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So I would recommend you to go back through my files, go to the playlist for the Maritime Monday, and go back and watch the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald video that we did a few months ago. That's top notch, and that anniversary is coming up this week. So let's get back to Antarctica.
Due to unusually cold temperatures, his ship became trapped in the ice. He was less than 100 miles from land, but it didn't matter. He would have to wait until the ice melted before he could reach the continent, which could take months. As if being stuck wasn't bad enough, Shackleton also had to prepare for the
and that's the actual photograph of the Endurance stuck in the ice. And the documentary we're going to watch next week has a lot more information about the sea voyage of the Endurance and what happened to it.
Possibility that the pressure being exerted by the ice would crush his ship. He removed weight from the vessel, hoping that it would rise in the event the ice pushed together. If If that didn't work, the ship would simply be crushed. The underwater sea currents exerted incredible forces, pulling both the ice and Shackleton's ship miles from shore. The frequent blizzards and freezing winds didn't help either. Shackleton and his crew could only wait, and wait they did, for 6 long, cold months. By the end of October, the ship had sustained significant damage to its...
Now, this is the interesting thing here. This is, again, this is the picture of the ship actually being pushed around and crushed by the ice, and the people that are standing there. But you got to remember, this is in Antarctica, where it's winter. It's July, but it's winter down there because it's in the southern hemisphere, and it's dark. It's dark nearly 24 hours a day. So they had to sit there in near darkness and sometimes utter darkness for 6 months, waiting for the ice to melt enough for them to move the ship.
Stern. Within a few days, it was obvious the Endurance wasn't going to make it. On October 27th, Shackleton finally gave the order to abandon ship. With the loss of the Endurance, any hope of completing the original mission went with it. Shackleton's sole focus became getting his men back to civilization, and it wasn't going to be easy. The ship had drifted 1,186 miles in 281 days. That put the team about 350 miles from remote Paulet Island.
Okay, now that's something that's important to notice too. Like you said, they didn't make it to Antarctica because they got stuck in the ice. That wasn't ice in some bay of Antarctica. It was a long, long way from shore. They were basically stuck on an ice floe that moved them over 1,000 miles away.
The nearest outpost that could provide shelter and supplies. The group salvaged as much as possible.
This is the
ship
actual
sank,
video.
But with their supplies decreasing, they were forced to supplement their diets by eating seals and even penguins. They spent almost a month salvaging before the ship finally disappeared beneath the icy water. Once it was gone, they headed out. Shackleton's plan was to march across the ice to the northern tip of Antarctica.
Now, again, they're really, really rushing through this video. That's why I said this is the prelude to next week. This is the Reader's Digest version. But what you saw there was the actual Endurance breaking up and sinking. And in the video we're going to watch next week, there's much, much more involved in that.
And if the ice broke apart, they would take to the lifeboats they salvaged from the Endurance. Once the ship sank, the main mission was over. And once that main mission was over, the sled dogs' days were numbered. Not only were they potential food, but the dogs actually consumed more meat than the men did, which made them a liability. On October 20th, 1915, Shackleton's second-in-command, Frank Wild, shot 5 of the dogs and the expedition's cat. By January of 1916, 30 dogs had been culled. And on March 30th, the last of the dogs were consumed.
I mean, look at this. Look at these guys here. Jeez. Those are people that have been 6 months in darkness, eating penguins, seals, dogs, and a cat to survive. Their ship is gone. Now the dogs are gone. And this is the condition they're left in.
At that point, the men were so hungry and desperate that they didn't care what they were eating. Frank Wild would later comment, "I have known many men who I would rather have shot than these dogs." Shackleton and his team started by heading north across the ice floes, but his exact route was limited by ice and weather conditions. It wouldn't be until April that there would be breaks in the ice significant enough to allow the men to navigate their lifeboats in the open water. Though they were initially hoping to use the boats to reach Deception Island, the frequent exposure to the freezing seawater exhausted the men. So instead, on April 15th, they put ashore on a 7-mile-long beach of Elephant Island, a small island off the northernmost peninsula of Antarctica. It was the first time Shackleton and his men had stood on land in 497 days. It was also the safest they had been in months. Camping on dry land was exponentially safer than camping on an ice floe that could break apart at...
Can you imagine that being on just not touching ground, not touching solid ground for nearly a year and a half, almost 2 years actually, because it was closer to 2 years. Just waiting to get home, trying to survive long enough to get home. Sapien Underground says, "Sounds like logistics, best stories." And Hypershot to thank you so much for the super sticker, which was what was the super sticker? I didn't catch as it scrolled on by. It was a hot dog. Should have known. All right. So now they've reached Elephant Island, this tiny little jutting piece of rock in the northern part of Antarctica. But they've only got these tiny little lifeboats. What do they do? How do they go on from there? So what? They've just gone from one ridiculously remote place to another ridiculously remote place.
Literally any moment.
That's how they
After
did it.
assessing the situation, Shackleton eventually concluded that the only way to save his men would be to reach South Georgia Island and return with help. Unfortunately, the island was over 900 miles away, across some of the most turbulent oceans on the face of the earth, and all Shackleton had was a 20-foot-long lifeboat. As if that wasn't hard enough, finding the tiny outpost that measured just 100 miles long and 20 miles wide would require exacting navigation, using only a chronometer and a sextant. The lifeboat was fitted with a mast and loaded up with a month's worth of supplies. Why just a month? Well, Shackleton reasoned that by then he should have succeeded, or died. Along with 5 other men, he set sail on April 24th.
That's balls. That is a man who has some epically big balls. They have a lifeboat. They have to convert into at least some sort of modicum of a sailboat. And they know they've got to sail 900 miles in this tiny little 20-foot long makeshift sailboat and try to find a piece of dirt 100 miles across in the middle of the ocean. Exactly. Spot that says, "Holy shit, my fucking kayak is 18 feet long." Fuck that. Exactly. Max Mura, thank you for the yen, my friend. For at Mullet Bullet Party with a Bang, Thursday, November 10th is the 247th birthday of the foundation of the United States Marine Corps. That is it, right there in the tavern. We'll give a little cheers to the tavern on November 10th. November 10th, 1775. We'll be there. Yes, and the weather. We're going to talk a little bit about the weather here. So, I mean, these are just balls the likes of men just don't have anymore. The guy says, "You guys just wait here. I'm going to take this as Spot that says this little kayak that has a that has a makeshift sail put on it, and we're going to sail 900 miles through the middle of the Arctic Ocean, the Antarctic Ocean, in freezing cold temperatures and again, another thing to remember, in the northern hemisphere, the autumn, from like August to October is hurricane and typhoon season. Well, that's reversed to April and May in the southern hemisphere. So not only are they sailing this tiny little boat 900 miles through the ocean near Antarctic in a boat that they basically made into a sailboat, they're doing it during hurricane season.
Frank Wild was left in command of the 22 men who stayed behind. If Shackleton didn't return by the following spring, they would try to reach an uninhabited whaling outpost on Deception Island. Shackleton's ship traveled about 60 miles a day, and the sailors were quickly drenched by the rough seas. They would spend the next few weeks wet and frostbitten, their skin raw and continuously irritated by the seawater. On the 5th day, they were hit by a powerful gale that threatened to capsize the ship and brought cold temperatures that froze the water on the boat in heavy layers.
Well, now, to be fair, it wasn't a heavy gale. It was a hurricane. They were they were essentially in a hurricane that blew for 9 hours. like a full force hurricane for 9 hours in this tiny little boat. And one of the cool things about this documentary next week is they have audio recordings of the people who lived through this. So you'll get to hear the voices of the people that were involved in this adventure, in this part of the adventure, talking about how the waves were so high that it was almost a point of no return for the boats, which means that the lifeboat would go up, but the waves would be too high, and then it would just slide back down again. The waves would crash over the boat, and that would be the end of it. But that never happened because of this, Shackleton, who had these amazing balls of steel with the other people in this boat. You do not want to miss the documentary next week. That will be amazing to watch. I wanted to do the whole thing today, but I thought that would do it a disservice. So we're going to give it its own little show next week. And we got 536 people watching now and 268 likes. Please hit that like button while we're down here and let's get going. They're back in the gale or the hurricane.
This ice needed to be constantly chipped off, and any excess weight, including the frozen sleeping bags and spare oars, had to be tossed overboard to maintain speed. The sun came out on the 7th day, by which point they had traversed about 350 miles. The next few days were calm, but day 11 brought another gale that almost sank them. Finally, just 14 days after leaving Elephant Island, the crew spotted South Georgia Island. You'd think it'd be celebration time, but the team couldn't find a suitable area to land, so they had to spend yet another night enduring hurricane-force conditions on their tiny boat. The next day, they made landfall at King Hawken Bay.
And what happened? You're seeing pictures. These pictures are drawn by the official artist of the journey, because, as I said, they had all of this the film equipment and all of this camera equipment, but they had to leave it behind. And I think they used all the film, and then they had to leave the other stuff behind because of the weight in the boat. So these pictures are drawn by the guy that was actually on this adventure here.
But the ordeal wasn't over. King Hawken Bay sits on the unsettled southern side of the island. With their rudder broken and their ship leaking, the team didn't think they could reach the other side of the island in a boat. Instead, they would have to cross on foot. This meant an unprecedented journey that would require traversing rocks, ice, and glaciers that reached 5,000 feet in elevation, all in deep snow.
So, I mean, God, listen to this adventure. They start out, they get stuck in an ice floe. They're forced to stay on this ice floe that drives them 1,100 miles off course in the dark for 6 months. And then they finally get to this island, this Elephant Island. And then, they're starting to basically starve to death. They've got to eat the dogs and seals and penguins. So Shackleton and 5 other dudes take off in this 20-foot raft to sail 900 miles through a hurricane to get to this island. Then once they get to the island, they've got to climb 5,000 feet over the mountains through deep snow to get to the little outpost on the other side of the island. How the fuck did these guys do this? That is some serious fortitude. And like I was saying, it's not ironic that the boat name was the Endurance.
But they had no choice. 3 of the men were too weak to make the trip, so Shackleton took 2 others with him and left the others at the bay. They took 3 days' worth of food, attached screws to the bottoms.
Okay, and this is something important to notice as well. You saw canned food there.
They took 3 days' worth of food.
This is one of the first maritime voyages to use canned food. Just a little something a little bit of trivia there for you. They use the canned meat and canned food basically so it could be preserved for the voyage. So now we've got the main group of people still stuck on Elephant Island, waiting for him to come back. They expected him to be back in about 2.5 to 3 months. Then he gets to island. Now they've left 3 people behind, and then 3 people are with him. So now they're in 3 separate groups.
Attached screws to the bottoms of their worn boots for traction and left their sleeping bags behind. Their destination was the whaling station at Stromness. The only catch was Shackleton hadn't been there in 2 years, and he wasn't even completely sure the station was still populated. Nevertheless, the trio set out on May 19th at 2 a.m., under the light of a full moon. They spent most of their first day getting lost among the glaciers and had to retrace their steps. Finally, they decided to escape the high altitude by gliding down the steep incline, roped together. It worked, but they still had to overcome another 2,000
Jeez.
foot glacier and a 25-foot waterfall before reaching the outskirts of Stromness.
I mean,
After their
God.
months long ordeal, the three men weren't looking so hot. Their clothes were filthy, tattered, and all three had long hair and beards. When they ran into two children on their way to the station, they got a predictably amusing response. Shackleton asked the children for the station manager by name, at which point the kids' eyes went wide with fear, and they turned and ran in the opposite direction. When Shackleton did finally track down the station master, the man had no idea who he was, despite the fact they had met before. The three men Shackleton left behind at King Haakon Bay were quickly retrieved by a whaling ship from Stromness. But rescuing the other 22 men that stayed behind on Elephant Island would be much more difficult.
Yeah, it's not over yet, folks. Yeah, he got to the whaling station. He got his other three guys from the bay, but these 22 people, it's not just as simple as sailing and going back to get them. That wouldn't be nearly dramatic enough, would it? No, no, there's got to be a huge issue to get back to save the people.
With the First World War raging, the British government didn't have much in the way of resources to spare. Shackleton tried reaching Elephant Island in a whaling ship, but he had to turn back when he encountered a barrier of solid ice. He would try and fail 3 more times. Finally, the Chilean government stepped in and
And I mean, this says a lot for Shackleton as a human being as well. He didn't send someone else on this stupid, ridiculous, foolhardy, suicidal 900-mile sea voyage to get help. He went himself. He put himself in that ship, expecting to either be there or dead within a month. Then when he gets there, he personally led a rescue attempt that failed. And then he failed 4 times. That's how, I mean, that's what a ballsy guy he was. He insisted on going back 4 times and he failed. And then finally, the Chilean government gives him this tugboat and he makes his 5th attempt to rescue these guys.
provided a small tugboat called the Yelcho. It set off on August 20th, and 5 days later, just as the 22 men on Elephant Island were preparing for a lunch of penguin breast and stewed seal bones, the Yelcho arrived. The men could see the Yelcho lower a smaller boat into the water. As it drew near, it became clear who was driving it: Ernest Shackleton. As he approached, he yelled, "All well?" Frank Wilde called back to him, "All safe, all well."
And if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what does. This badass motherfucker did not lose a single man on this entire expedition. Not one of those 22 men that he left behind on Elephant Island died. Not one of the people that went with him in that boat died. He survived, he rescued and protected the lives of every single man on his voyage. The dogs weren't so lucky, but that's how badass he was. Not a single man down on this entire voyage.
Within an hour, all 22 men were headed back safely to Punta Arenas, Chile. Because of the war, Shackleton's return to Britain didn't receive much attention. Shortly after he got back, he volunteered for the army and was eventually involved in efforts in both Norway and Russia. Once the war was over, Shackleton borrowed some money from a college classmate to mount
And this guy who nearly died a few years before, he survives a world war. And then he says, all right, we got to go back and do this again. Just chill on the testosterone here, bro. I mean, this is a man's man. You don't do this. Nobody does this. You survive that experience, go through a war, and then go, oh, yeah, let's get back to that thing we were trying to do before.
yet another expedition to Antarctica. This time he intended to circumnavigate the continent. However, Shackleton's health was deteriorating in the years leading up to this expedition, and on January 4th, 1922, shortly after arriving on South Georgia Island, he suffered a fatal heart attack. His wife requested that he be buried in a small cemetery on that island, where he rests to this day. So, what do you think? Could you survive a Shackleton expedition?
No.
Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.
Yeah, so what do you think of that story? That's the short version. That's the Reader's Digest version. That's the abridged, condensed version. Next week, we're going to watch a full hour and a half length documentary on that, where we get really, really deep into what happened, what they did, how they survived, how they planned their escape, and how they brought it about. I'd probably be dead about 5 minutes into this stupid voyage. I, I'm not, you know, I'm not making any pretense that I would survive this thing. Jesus. I mean, yeah, this guy Shackleton had balls of steel. As I said in the video description, they just don't make men like that anymore. I'd be good protein. Yeah, so we're gonna get to the documentary next week, but this story's not over yet. This story, balls steel, yeah, bone, the bone steel.
Ball steel.
Had to do that. Sorry. That's you can blame Nicola for that one. Where'd you put it? Yep. See, there's my proof. She made me do it. Yeah, and like I said, I don't if that doesn't give you some serious goosebumps, that he did all of that, and basically those poor guys and the 22 guys that were sitting there at that on this elephant island were there for like 18 months during all. I mean, this is just astounding that none of them died. Not even one guy got pneumonia and died. Every single man that went with him on that journey, went through all of that, came home. X-Comer says, imagine if it was the captain of the Costa Concordia. Oh, yeah. He'd probably be the first one eaten. Hypershata left civilization and came back to a world at war. And that's the one thing they talk about during this in this documentary of next week. How when they left, it was the whole thing was all about them. And then 2 years later, they come back and literally the world is on fire. And how a lot of them couldn't cope with that. So yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll get to you in a second here, Tank Rat. Flux, that legit made all the hairs on my body stand up. And it should. I mean, it's an amazing story. You had any shots yet? Just started watch since shift change is over. Well, when you get to this part, the drunken stream will continue tomorrow. I owe you guys 15 shots and a whole bunch of super chats that, as I said, I either didn't read or don't remember whether I read or not. So we're going to go back over those. We're going to try to do as many of the shots as we can, and we're going to update you on the Taylor Ship business case. But yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite stories. And I mean, there's lots of great books written about it where you can learn more about the history of this. And it's astounding. And as I said at the very beginning, there is no more appropriate name for a ship than the Endurance when talking about this case. Now, as I said, it ain't over yet. What happened recently? Let's go back only about 10 years. A little more than 10 years. About 12 years. We gotta go back 12 years to find Shackleton's name coming up again. Jefferson, how much for that hat you have on? Love the hat. You can get it from Sterkowski.com. Sterkowski. There you go, Sterkowski. It's in Warsaw, Poland. It's about, I think it was like $68, something like that. And it's a wool hat, so this thing keeps you toasty in the winter. Awesome. Yeah, so this is a Polish fishing boat captain's hat. So as I was saying, let's go back. Let's go back 12 years when Shackleton's name unexpectedly comes up again, where we learn some more things about the Shackleton expedition. As we dive into this, 619 of you are watching now, 349 likes. I'd love it if you would just click that like button and let's get us up to 600 likes instantly. If all of you that haven't liked it, hit that like button now, we'll be to 600, and then YouTube will love me, and I in turn will love all of you. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do. And if you have hit the subscribe button previously, just make sure you're still checked, because YouTube apparently blitzed like 25 subscribers last night for no reason whatsoever. Where are we going here? Another super chat comes in from the last conquistador. One of these days I'll get through that without chuckling and giggling like a 12-year-old schoolboy. It's a miracle that 20-foot makeshift sailboat didn't capsize from the weight of Shackleton's balls. Exactly. Throw those puppies overboard. Sapient Underground, poetry, balls of steel, will to survive, icy hell, and yet they're alive. 4 times back, Chili's give hope. Shacky comes back, says failure, nope, none left behind, forget the dogs. World War burns, nah, heart clogs. Thank you for that. I was trying to unclick that and I clicked it again. Well, what happened 12 years ago? What happened 12 years ago is this. Century-old whiskey recovered from the ice of Antarctica. I promised you, if you'll recall, a whiskey tie-in to this story. This is it. What more could the law racks, legal vices want than a story that involves maritime adventure as well as whiskey? I can't imagine. This is the story. The Shackleton story is the story that's made for me. We've got booze. We've got maritime adventures. Now, let's look at this second part of the story. Here we go. Century-old whiskey is recovered from the ice of Antarctica. Let's figure out how it was found and how it was recovered and what became of this stuff. London, February 5th, 2010. Whiskey bottles belonging to the Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton, kept on ice for more than 100 years, have been found and retrieved from beneath the explorer's abandoned hut. The 3 cases of what is now aged scotch, that's not correct. Once you put scotch in a bottle, it does not age. All of the aging is done in the barrel. Whiskey does not age a microsecond once it's in the bottle. So it's not aged scotch, it's just really old scotch. Jefferson said, Jesus Christ, leave it to Jeff to find a story involving a century-old whiskey. Oh no, it gets better. X-Homer says, why the hell did they leave the booze behind? Well, unfortunately, no cannibalism. I'm Irish too, so the Jeff caps wear are awesome. Yep. What the hell is that? Oh shit. That would be work calling. Oh, good, they hung up. Solved that problem. I'll just have to call. I know it's one of my clients from Bangladesh calling, but I'm busy. Sorry, bruh. All right. I'm Irish too, so the caps, all my flat caps, they all come from Aran Sweater Market in Ireland. So, as well as the cardigans that I'll be wearing once it cools off a little bit. I get all of my wool cardigans from Aran Sweater Market. Aran Sweater Market, if you're listening, hit me up for a sponsorship. All right, 3 cases of what is now just old scotch, and 2 cases of brandy were left behind when Shackleton ran out of other supplies and gave up his attempt to reach the South Pole in 1909. The bottles are now being examined by a team of scientists from New Zealand, who were surprised to have found so much alcohol still intact. We thought there were 2 crates possibly containing whiskey under the 1908 building. To our amazement, we found 5 crates, 3 labeled as containing whiskey and 2 labeled as containing brandy, team leader Al Fostier said in a statement today. White and Mackay, the current owner of the McKinley distillery, which provided Shackleton with his alcohol supplies, launched the expedition by the New Zealand Antarctic Heritage Trust to recover the Scotch. So White and Mackay, who we're going to be talking about in a little bit, we've mentioned them before, but you may not remember White and Mackay. White and Mackay, they started an expedition to recover the Scotch, which is just cool. Now, White and Mackay wants to also recover the recipe for Shackleton's Scotch. After bringing it to room temperature, I plan on pouring it into a glass, swirling it around and letting the liquid reveal the hidden treasures that were captured in the ice for all these years. Richard Patterson, one of the lead blenders for White and Mackay, told ABC News with obvious excitement. Those of you that have been here before that know my channel on the whiskey shows we've done, Richard Patterson, the nose, he was the one that did the tasting video where you taste the whiskey and an absolute boss. If you want to know who Richard Patterson is, just search Richard Patterson, how to drink whiskey like a boss or how to drink whiskey like a sir. And he will be all over the video. Richard Patterson, they call him the nose, and he legit has his nose insured for $1 bajillion. It says here he's one of the lead blenders. No, he is the master blender for White and Mackay. And he's been doing it for, at this point, about 56 years, I think. And his father was a blender before him. So I think his grandfather was too. So Richard Patterson, the master blender for White and Mackay. And if you've seen his videos, you know that sounds just like him. After bringing it to room temperature, I plan on pouring it into a glass, swirling it around and letting the liquid reveal the hidden treasures that were captured in the ice for all those years. He also has other plans for the historic blend. If the contents can be confirmed, safely extracted, and analyzed, the original blend may be able to be replicated. Given the original recipe no longer exists, this may open a door into history, he said. So Richard the Nose Patterson plans on extracting some of the Scotch from the bottle and trying to replicate the recipe. We look forward to working with the trust to try and replicate the whiskey for mutual benefit, allow people to taste a true part of history, and be part of what must be the whiskey story of the century, Patterson said. But there's a problem. Shackleton's whiskey is under control of treaty. There's this big Antarctic treaty that nobody gets to touch anything in Antarctica. As of now, the results of the bottle are still under wraps. The New Zealanders have agreed to update Patterson on the possibility of extracting the alcohol from some of the bottles. But the rest will remain with the trust in observance of the 12 Antarctic Treaty Nation guidelines. Shackleton, who once famously said, "If I had not some strength of will, I would make a first-class drunkard," failed on his attempt to reach the South Pole. I love that quote. If I had not some strength of will, I would make a first-class drunkard. That's me. I completely agree with that as well. That's my story. If I didn't have control, I would be an awesome drunkard. Which began with 25 crates of booze. See, that tells you. They started with 25 crates, and they ended up with only 5 in a relatively short period of time. His Nimrod expedition ran short of supplies on its long ski trek to the South Pole from the northern Antarctic coast in 1907 and 1909, and turned back about 100 miles short of its goal. The expedition sailed away in 1909 as winter ice formed, leaving behind supplies including whiskey and brandy. So this is actually from an earlier expedition because it was to I believe it was an earlier. They were trying to get there, but they got like 90 miles away from the 100, like 90, 92 miles away from the South Pole. But what happens next? The story's not over yet, folks. We're not done with the Shackleton expedition yet. Before we get to the next step, Alan Walsh, Legal Vices. Do you like Johnny Walker's whiskey, Jeff? Yes. I'm not a big blended Scotch guy. I mean, I like some blended Scotch, but I'm more of a single malt guy. But I mean, to be honest, Johnny Walker's whiskey doesn't get me excited. I mean, why spend $250 to $300 on a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue when you can spend half of that for an amazingly superior Glenmorangie 18, or a little bit more for a Glenmorangie Signet or something like that? That's just me. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not my flavor. Jeremiah Hutchinson, we are going to Antarctica. Why? To find whiskey. Yeah, I'm in. Exactly. But what happened with this whiskey? The New Zealand government were thinking, we'll let you know, Richard Patterson, if there's going to be any way to get some of this whiskey out. Well, what happened is this. We'll let Richard Patterson tell you in his own words.
This, with having worked for White Mackay for 40 years, this is one of the most exciting projects I've ever worked with. And it will be of historical benefit, not just to revere Sir Ernest Shackleton's name, but it will also hopefully show that once again that Scotch whisky is the #1 spirit of the world. Well, obviously this goes back to 2007 February when we were told about the find. We were told there was some whisky, but we didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until 2010, believe it or not, that they unearthed 3 cases. And we were told, obviously, it was confirmed as being McKinley's. But we didn't know if the whiskey was in a stable condition. We didn't even know if there was any whiskies left in the bottles. So that's what's taken all this length of time. But finally, we were told, yes, the whiskey's there. They could hear it sloshing around in the case. And they brought one case to the Antarctic Heritage Trust, where they looked at the bottles and they awaited permission for us to remove 3 bottles. And that's what we did over the last 4 days. So we flew out to New Zealand. We are allowed to have 3 bottles, which we've now got. This is one of them here. As you can see, it's been in the ice for over 100 years. It's very delicate. The paper, everything about it is extremely delicate. And we're going to extract the whiskey with a syringe. We have to make sure that there is no damage whatsoever to the label and the capsule. So that's going to be quite difficult, especially in its very sensitive, delicate state. And we're going to have a look at it, and we're going to research and for the Scotch whisky industry to see what kind of whiskey, what kind of style, what the distilling practices are way back in the 19th century. Because you've got to remember, this is a whiskey that's been in a fridge for over 100 years. It's been held in tandem.
I mean, I like the way he phrases that. It's been in a refrigerator for 100 years.
And this is a great research ahead of us, and we want to see what kind of whiskey is really what it's all about. It could be a single malt, it could be a blended malt, it could even be a blended whiskey, but the research, the analysis will have to give us these results. Is it a light style? Is it a heavy style? Is it a smoky style? These are questions, again, that will need to be answered over the next few weeks. Well, what happens now is that tomorrow morning, after hopefully catching up with a little sleep, we're going to put them back into these containers, and we're going to take them up north, and we're going to put them into a sealed unit, and we're going to slowly but surely extract the whiskey, and then the analysis will begin. What's the strength? What's the age? What's the impact on the distillation? What kind of maturation went on? All these kind of exciting questions that will have to be answered over the next few weeks.
Isn't this a fascinating story, though? To find this and to get this and to bring it back to Scotland for analysis, back to the mothership, back to White and Mackay.
Well, I've had the privilege and honor of sampling quite a number of blends and single malts from the 19th century. And in the main, generally, these whiskies were very heavy. They were peated style whiskies. And I'm just wondering if this is the same. Again, we won't know until we extract the whiskey.
And I mean, asking this question, what's it like to touch these bottles, to a man who's a third generation single malt Scotch blender and who just happens to be working for the parent company that owns the people that made this whiskey 100 years ago.
It was a very poignant moment. It was quite emotional, I have to be honest, because having worked with this for the last 4 years, to finally hold it and to be part of that great project is something that I'll never forget as far as I'm concerned, as long as I live. I'm delighted to say that our chair...
Notice that, and this is like no joke, by the way.
I'm delighted.
Notice the handcuffs on the case.
To say that our chairman, Dr. Vijay Mallya, actually offered his private jet for this, because this box that where the bottle sat in had to be with me the whole time in a cabin, and it had to be there with me, and he very kindly orchestrated that. He had no hesitation. He was a great supporter of the Antarctic Heritage Trust as well, and he brought it onto his plane from Christchurch. We literally flew in that day, and we flew out that day with these bottles, and they're safely here thanks to him.
The history in this room is just stunningly remarkable. These are the treasures of White and Mackay.
So they take this whiskey back to Scotland and they extract just a tiny amount using a syringe through the cork. But then what happens? Nathan C said, well, which Starkovsky Kashubia model do you have? I think it's a 2. I'm not sure. It's been so long. It doesn't say anywhere on the hat. It's the one that looks like this. I'm not sure. I think it's a 2. Just get the one that you like best. The one that you think looks best. This is one I thought looked best. I think it's a 2. I can't remember. Renovations is probably some of the rarest whiskey on earth right now. Oh, it's more rare than you could possibly imagine. Why? Why is it more rare than you could possibly imagine? Because of what happened next. The whiskey is returned to the hut in Antarctica. So from the 5 cases that were there, they managed to get 3 bottles out. They managed to take samples from the bottle, and then they returned the bottles. Flux says Yen is best girl. Okay, we'll take your word for it. I'm not sure what you're referencing, but hey, thanks for the super chat, Flux. Yen can be best girl for a super chat. All right, let's move back on. Why? Why, we ask, why was it returned? Bruh, why? Everybody's asking why. Someone says, good morning. Well, there's a big, important reason for this. And I think this is a very, very, yeah. Is it Yennefer from? If it's Yennefer from The Witcher you're talking about, I disagree. It's Triss. Triss is the best. Anywho, talk about whiskey on ice. 3 bottles of rare 19th century scotch found beneath the floorboards of Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton's abandoned expedition base were returned to the polar continent Saturday after a distiller flew them to Scotland to recreate the long-lost recipe. But not even New Zealand Prime Minister John Key, who personally returned the stash, got a taste of the contents of the bottle of McKinley's whiskey, which were rediscovered 102 years after the explorer was forced to leave them behind. I think we're all tempted to crack it open and have a little drink ourselves now, Key joked at a ceremony handing over the bottles to Antarctic Heritage Trust officials at New Zealand's Antarctic base on Ross Island. What Jimmy the Saint says I'm called BS. No, here we go. What is the recipe? Peat moss? Just wait. The whiskey will be transferred by March from Ross Island to Shackleton's desolate hut at Cape Royds and placed beneath the restored hut as part of a program to protect the legacy of the so-called heroic era of Antarctic exploration from 1898 to 1915. Bottled in 1898, after the blend was aged 15 years, the McKinley bottles are among 3 crates of scotch and 2 of brandy buried beneath a basic hut Shackleton had used during his dramatic 1907 Nimrod excursion to the Antarctic. The expedition failed to reach the South Pole, but set a record at the time for reaching the farthest southern latitude. Shackleton was knighted after his return to Great Britain. Shackleton's stash was discovered frozen by ice by conservationists in 2010. The crates were frozen solid after more than a century beneath the Antarctic ice. But the bottles were found intact, and researchers could hear the whiskey sloshing around inside. Antarctic's minus 30 degrees Celsius temperature was not enough to freeze the liquor. Now, that tells you one thing. The alcohol content was high. 40% alcohol freezes at, I believe, what is it? Like minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that's about, I can't remember where 40% alcohol freezes, but the alcohol content of this whiskey was so high that it hadn't frozen after 100 years at minus 30 degrees Celsius. No, wait. So they can recreate the blend, but there's no sensible way to compare it to the original. We're getting there. We're getting there. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. Shackleton's stash was discovered frozen by, okay, the crates were frozen solid, blah, 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 money. Okay, there we go. Such a lovely aroma. The bottles remained unopened as they were returned Saturday. And I like this. If Shackleton couldn't have a dram, no one could. But their contents nevertheless formed the basis for a revival of the blend. Distiller White & Mackay, which now owns the McKinley brand, chartered a private jet to take the bottles from Antarctic Operations Headquarters in the New Zealand city of Christchurch to Scotland for analysis in 2011. The recipe for the whiskey had been lost, but White & Mackay recreated a limited edition of 50,000 bottles costing about $157 each from a sample drawn with a syringe through a cork of one of the bottles. The conservation work of the Antarctic Heritage Trust has received 5% of the proceeds from every bottle sold. So they extracted a sample with a syringe through the cork, and they did some scientific analysis on it, as well as Richard Patterson, as far as I know, being the only person on Earth that got to taste that whiskey, where he tasted it and compared it, and so that's the comparison we have to the original. Is what their analysis and Richard Patterson's tasting of it revealed to us. The original bottles had flown in 2 combination locked containers with key to Antarctica in a U.S. Air Force transport plane from Christchurch on Friday. Arctic Heritage Trust manager Lizzie Meek, who was part of the team that found the whiskey, recalled its pleasant aroma. When you're used to working around things in that hut that perhaps are quite decayed and some of them don't have very nice smells, it's very nice to work with artifacts that have such a lovely aroma. Meek told the ceremony by radio from explorer Robert Scott's Antarctic hut, which she was restoring. And definitively, the aroma of whiskey was around very strongly. So yes, where someone said here there was a lot of jet fuel. Where'd that go? Oh yes, wow, a lot of jet fuel to move some bottles. There was quite a bit. So they're taking it back because it's part of the Antarctic Heritage Trust. I mean, it's treaty based. There's basically treaties that say you can't do anything to anything in Antarctica. It's there. It's part of it is now part of Antarctica and is protected by the trust. And there's also the reason that, as they said, the Shackleton couldn't drink any of it, so you can't either. But that's the romantic way of saying it. But it's basically controlled by treaty. They're required to protect it and preserve it and keep it there. Now, if they would have found it at the bottom of the ocean, a little bit off of shore, then it would be a different story. So, what did they do? They recreated it, and they made a limited run of 50,000 bottles at about $160 a piece. And let's hear a little bit about that, shall we?
Hi, I'm Richard Patterson. I'm the master blender for White and Mackay, and I had the honor way back in 2011 to create the Shackleton whiskey, or the McKinley Highland malt as it was known way back then. You've got to remember, way back in 1907, we give Ernest Shackleton 25 cases to accompany him, along with 12 cases of brandy and 6 cases of port to accompany all these 15 men down to the Antarctica. As all of you will know, on Saturday, the 9th of January 1909, he got within 97 miles to the South Pole. But he had to make a decision. Do I go on and I die, or do I turn around and save my men? And that's what Ernest Shackleton did. He turned around and he got back in March 1909. But little do we know, when he sailed back to the United Kingdom, he had left 3 cases of this wonderful whiskey. Then in 2011, I managed to retrieve just 3 bottles, and I was given the honor and privilege of recreating it. We didn't know at that time if it was a blended malt, single malt, or a blended whiskey, but it transpired that it came originally from the Glenmore Distillery, built 1892, closed 1983. So what I wanted to do was to take some of that original whiskey, but obviously the distillery had closed, but I managed to source 1 cask, a 1980 Glenmore 1980, spookily enough, cask number 1907, along with taking whiskeys from the space.
Now, there's some weird stuff that happens with all of this Shackleton stuff. The expedition we were talking about earlier, there's some weird stuff about that we'll talk about in just a minute. Now, the other Shackleton expedition, the 1907 expedition, it's weird that they found a cask number 1907 that was partially used to recreate this.
Side Valley, the Highland region, but more importantly, that phenolics. The phenolics, of course, is coming in at 3.5% phenolics. So that was the most difficult part to create. After about 40 different samples of trial and entering, we finally created this whiskey. And as you can see, once again, the first thing you have to look about it is the color, but more importantly, the strength is 47.3% alcohol. That's why this whiskey was in the ice for 103 years, but did not freeze.
So that's what I was talking about. It's 47% alcohol. So it takes a lot colder temperatures to freeze.
So you have to look at the alcohol.
It would be fucking hilarious if he dropped. This is the recreation bottle here. This is the reblended the recipe bottle. This is a $157 bottle. Wouldn't phase him if he dropped it. This isn't one of the all the original bottles are back in Antarctica. This is the recreated whiskey.
When you bring it up and you say hello, then you go back to it and say, how are you? And then you go back up and say, quite well, thank you very much. Pear, apple, cinnamon, spice, honey, vanilla, and then you get that whisper of the peat towards the end. This is what gives this whiskey the edge, the charisma, and really what reflects of whiskies of the 19th century. So I'd like you to think when you drink this, remember the style of the whiskey during that period, but more importantly, the memory of Sir Ernest Shackleton and his other 14 men. These were not just heroes, they were unbelievably courageous. They had real style panache, and it's good that we should remember them through this lovely, wonderful Highland malt whiskey. The McKinley's Shackleton whiskey, something truly unforgettable.
So that whiskey, that limited series whiskey, we're going to talk about that in just one quick second here. But first, $2 distiller. I hardly knew her. That was a good one. I almost read that one wrong. Nice. Flux, screw off, Jeff. Yen is best girl. Nah, sorry. Got to go with Triss. Triss is my babe. Shannon 7, you always have awesome stories, like a time capsule. Have you heard about the women who were able to grow seeds from biblical times? No, I have not. Cool history. Cool. All righty. And given her, looks like they did some more 18 pounds on Amazon. Well, that's what, see, I told you no spoilers. You do all these spoiler things. Now, the 50,000 bottles went so quickly and were so popular, they decided to reopen the Spooky says, love you, Jeff. You too, Spook. They decided to reopen the distillery and to make this blend part of their core range. Except they proofed it down from 47% to 40%. And that's what we have right here. We have McKinley's Shackleton blended malt Scotch whiskey. And it says, based on an antique blend of McKinley's rare old Highland malt whiskey. The spirit supplied to the 1907 British Arctic expedition. Signed here by Richard Patterson. Obviously digitally, not a real signature. And it has a quote from Ernest Shackleton here on the back, embossed into the glass. I believe it is in our nature to explore, to reach out into the unknown. Ernest Shackleton. And so I would not be a good law rat or a good Maritime Monday host or a good whiskey drinker if I did not open this up and drink it in front of you. Oh my God. It just smells like oranges and honey. Hello, Kurt. Welcome. I'm just getting ready to sample some whiskey from the Shackleton expedition. Oh, all right. We're going to do this 3 ways. We're going to do it one, just a little bit here, just a little sip. Oh, a little bit of lemons, like oranges, and like if you boiled like oranges and lemon and honey to make a tea. A little hint of peat right at the end. There's something else in there. Vanilla? That is really good. And it tastes just like it smells. There's like some gingerbread, kind of a marzipan kind of thing going on there. Vanilla. oranges, lemon peel, lemon zest, honey, lots of honey. Like right now, the finish is just all honey with this little kind of tickling of not an Isla heavy, smoky peat, but just this like little tingling of like heather peat. Mm. I wish you could all taste this. This is so good. Mm. Well, that's one way to taste it. Mm. Are you supposed to chew whiskey, says Cloud Illusions? Yes. Christmassy, that's a good way of describing it. Who said that? Someone said you're Christmassy. So it's Christmassy, execution, yes. That's a very good way of saying it. Now, that was straight. Now we'll drop a couple of drops of water into it and see. I'm a nerd, so I have one of these. Just like 4 drops. That was about 10 drops, but oh well. We can always add a little more whiskey to kind of. You want to reduce the alcohol content to about 20%, because that opens up a whole new range of flavors that are covered by the alcohol taste itself. So if you really want to get into it, drop it down to about 20%. Weirdly, now it tastes. I mean, it smells a little more alcohol-y than it did before I put the water in. So I guess it's releasing a lot of the alcohol vapors. It smells better without the water in it. Yeah, it dampens a lot of that fruity, citrusy, and honey smells. I just kind of smell alcohol. It just killed all the flavor. Damn it. Not a fan of it with water. But the way they recommended, and again, like the original bottle, it says here on the box, which is a great little box, a contribution from sales of this whiskey will be made to the Arctic Heritage Trust. This will support both the ongoing care of Shackleton's Arctic base and the Trust mission to conserve, share, and encourage the spirit of exploration, a spirit embodied by Shackleton. So it says on the front of the box, it says discovered under ice, served over ice. So we'll do one last tasting with it over ice, and I'm cool because this came with a Shackleton glass, and it also came with like a little square Shackleton silicone ice mold that said Shackleton on it. So you get a little tiny ice mold, you get the glass, but I have my own super awesome ice balls. But I've got a beautiful crystal clear square custom ice cube. And we'll just pour a little bit of this whiskey over the top. What a beautiful sound. Pour that right over the ice cube. We're not done with the Shackleton story, by the way, guys. Just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful glass. With a beautiful crystal clear ice cube. It almost looks invisible except for where my fingerprints are on the side of the glass. Yeah, I see. Almost invisible ice. Perfect. Wait for it to now putting it on ice brings a lot of chocolate on the nose. It's like those little chocolate orange, like the orange marmalade filled chocolate ladyfinger things. Oh, yeah. The water just sucked. That just made it suck. The ice, it's like chocolate now, like chocolate and orange and honey and vanilla. Over ice, it's a lot of honey and vanilla. The citrus kind of goes away, but there's a lot of honey and vanilla on the icy one. I love my ice cubes. They're so nice when they're like perfectly invisible. Mm. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a good whiskey. That is not bad at all. Here in Korea, it's about $50, $49, $50. So I guess everywhere else it'd probably be about half that. It'd be probably about the same in Australia. I would guess like in England or the States, you could get it for half that. So $25, $30 a bottle. Just a rough guess. I have no idea. Meme copium, like I said, here it was like $50. So like 40, 45, $50 here in Korea. So I don't know how that compares to Japan. I would guess it'd be like half that in the States in London. Probably about the same in Australia. Givener says, I will taste it tonight. Yay. Go get it. And let me know what you think. You come back later and leave a comment. That would be awesome. Spooky alcohol? Yes, alcohol. With an exclamation mark. See if I missed any super chats here because I don't want to miss any super chats. We did not miss any super chats. That's good. Except for the one that we haven't got to yet. So don't panic if that was yours. Yeah, which is right here. Could you do a maritime show on the Saywolf Ferry, please? No, I will never, ever do a show on the Saywolf Ferry. I've explained this like a bunch of times, so I know this is your first time hearing this explanation. I think I've threatened to do it before. I think I'm going to do a show on why we'll never review the Saywolf Ferry disaster. Long answer short, it's sacred ground. It's a sacred story. Even Koreans don't talk a lot about the Saywolf. They remember it every April 16th, but not a lot of people talk about it. It's a super hot button political issue. Anybody doing anything about the Saywolf is frowned upon. It's just not done. And as a foreigner, I'm especially not in the group that can say anything about it or talk about it. If you want to watch videos about the Saywolf Ferry, there's the YouTube channel that we use a lot here for the maritime disasters, Brick Immortar. He has 2 different videos on the Saywolf Ferry accident that are very good. But again, I as someone who is living in Korea, I have not a thing to gain by talking about that story, and I just have a lot of things to lose and a lot of enemies to make and a lot of face to lose. That's the short story. That's the short reason. So there'll never be a video from me about the Saywolf Ferry. But again, I would highly recommend Brick Immortar's books on the Saywolf, his videos on the Saywolf Ferry disaster. Tank Rat drank 3.5 liters of Dragon Treasure green tea yesterday, but I got it using code VICES. You can combine some codes. Oh yeah, they have that. Currently, they're doing like a code combination thing for shipping and stuff, I believe. You have to go there to the site and see what other promo codes you can use. If you go there and use code VICES, you get 10% off. You want to do it. Dennis Heaton says, I love long pork. And those of you that were here for our 2 weeks of cannibal stories, you will know what long pork is. Amnuk, no spoilers. No, that's the thing. We don't do spoilers here. The story of the Shackleton expedition is not over yet, folks. I told you it's a 3-layer story. We've only got through 2 of the 3 layers. We got through the expedition with the Endurance. Then we went back to the 1907 expedition. And we got the whiskey, which is really, it's surprisingly good for being that inexpensive of a whiskey. Exegation says, you're going to jump on with Branca in 30 minutes. Yes. All right. All right, there's still one more layer to this. One more layer to this story. And this is it. This was earlier this year. Shackleton's expedition came up again in the news. Shackleton's expedition came up once again. Why did it come up again? Well, this is why it came up again. Shackleton's ship Endurance was found. They found the wreck of the Endurance at the bottom of the ocean earlier this year. And this is a video talking about finding the ship. This is the guy that found the ship, and he's going to tell us about finding it. Legal Vices, why does the water take out the flavor but ice doesn't? Well, the water dilutes it, whereas the ice cube it cools down the temperature, so it does different things to it. But if you put like small, like regular little tiny, like a bunch of ice cubes into a glass of whiskey, it'll melt really quickly, and that will dilute and cool it down. But that's why you use like the big balls of whiskey, or the big cubes big balls of whiskey, the big ice balls or the big cubes of ice, because it melts slower and it dilutes it slower. So yeah, the dilution and the temperature change will do different things to the flavor of the whiskey. But if you want to dilute it and cool it down, then just use like small little ice cubes. All right. Let's go with the finding of the vessel.
We were in the Weddell Sea for a month. We were moving up and down. We were surveying the seabed. The temperature was plummeting. We were brushing the snow off ourselves. And then we found it. With a few days left to go, we found it on the seabed. We'd started to give up hope.
That's the Endurance right there. Today, earlier this year. Look at how immaculately preserved this ship is under the Arctic ice.
But there it was. And since then, we've been pretty happy, I've got to say.
And what was that moment like when you saw it for the first time, and the condition that it's in?
You know, when you work towards something for so many months and years, in the case of some of the people on this ship, you forget that what it is you're actually working towards sometimes. You just, it gets lost in the details. So when you actually see it, the ship that you've given up so much, people have left families behind and they've sacrificed in so many ways. When you see that ship, you think, I can't believe we've done this. It strikes you. First of all, we were very quiet. And then eventually we just started cheering and clapping and all the rest of it. But there was a moment of just awe and silence, and we just couldn't quite believe that we'd done it. And particularly because the ship, as you mentioned, is in astonishing condition. The wood is like a golden brown color. You can still see the gold lettering on the stern, the brass lettering shining like gold, saying Endurance. It just looks like a serviceable vessel to this day, because of the lack of wood-eating microorganisms in the Weddell Sea in Antarctica. The temperature of the water is so cold. It just is so beautifully preserved. And we realized that we had something big on our hands. We realized that this was going to reach far beyond the community of people that care about Shackleton or history. This was going to go all over the world, and it was going to inspire people.
Yeah, it really does look like something out of a movie, huh?
You're absolutely right. And that's partly the technology. We've been able to get down there with ultra-high definition cameras. We've been able to get down there with laser scanning. So we've got a millimeter perfect 3D model of the ship. And it just means that we can now broadcast our findings in a way that 10, 20, 30 years ago would have been much, much harder to engage with people. Now people are opening up social media and they're like, what is going on here? This is extraordinary. It's also the water in the Weddell Sea is some of the clearest water on planet Earth. So you just get the clarity. You can see so much on the ship.
So tell us a bit about the history of Shackleton and this particular expedition that he was on.
Well, buckle up, because it's the greatest story of survival and heroism of all time. He goes into the Weddell Sea intending to cross the Antarctic continent from one side to the other. No one's ever done that before. He doesn't even get to the shore. He gets frozen in the ice on his way there. The ice then moves. It moves him north and away from Antarctica, and it eventually crushes his ship, and his men have to camp on the ice, and they watch their ship sink on the 21st November 1915. Then they live on the ice a few more months. It starts to break up in the spring. The ice flow is no longer livable.
And so just note the sinking, the date that the Endurance sank below the ice is 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today is the anniversary of the sinking of the Endurance in the Antarctica. But as I said, with the same deal with the White and Mackay finding one old cask 1907, which coincidentally was the year of the expedition that left the whiskey behind in Antarctica. There's yet another weird coincidence of this expedition that's coming up.
Pile into 3 rowing boats they have with them and cross this stretch of ocean actually that I'm on now, going to Elephant Island, a little scrap of land in which it's really impossible to survive a very long time, but at least it's land. They get on the shore, they kiss the ground. They haven't been on shore for 500 days. Then Shackleton takes an elite group and goes 800 miles to South Georgia, where there is a whaling station with other human beings. Through some of the roughest seas on planet Earth, they survive a hurricane. They then get to South Georgia, climb over some mountains and glaciers, and get help from these whalers in South Georgia. He then goes back and rescues everyone on Elephant Island. It's an extraordinary tale.
So what are you expecting to find on the ship?
So we found, just looking at what's on the surface, there's the ship's bell, there's crockery, some plates, there's a boot, a mysterious boot lying there on the deck. There's an instrument for measuring the depth, which looks like you could use it today. You can still see the figures it's like a clock face showing the depth, and it's perfect condition. It's a thing of beauty in itself, but I think more than that, it just will inspire anyone that sees it with a passion for exploration, for adventure, for getting out there and finding lost things.
So what's your plan with the wreck now? Are you going to be retrieving things from it?
We're not allowed to touch it. So it's protected by the Antarctic Treaty. It's going to be left down there. We've done a survey. We haven't retrieved anything from it. We haven't fiddled with it. We haven't done anything to it at all. So it'll stay there. Maybe in 100 years' time, who knows? They might find a way to lift it, preserve it and everything. But for the moment, it stays where it lies.
And what about the timing of this close to the...
Now, here is this. This is the other really freaking weird coincidence. Like, so we had the coincidence of the 1907 barrel and the 1907 expedition. Here is the next really weird coincidence about this story.
100th
lies.
And what about the timing of this close to the 100th anniversary of Shackleton's funeral?
Well, this is the weird thing. We discovered it on Saturday, March the 5th, 2022. Exactly 100 years to the day since Shackleton was buried on South Georgia on his 4th, final, and obviously unfinished Antarctic expedition, because he died.
How weird is that? They discovered the Endurance on the day of the 100th anniversary of the burial of Shackleton. That's just weird to me. That's just a really weird coincidence.
During it. It is a spooky echo from history.
Yeah. And Dan, tell us about your expedition. When did this begin, this effort to find the ship?
Well, people have been planning this for years, of course, getting the technology sorted, gathering the funds, gathering the expedition together. We've been planning it for a long time as well, and setting up things like this, the way we wanted to film it, and TikTok it, and Instagram it, and use all the modern technology we could to bring this to life for people all over the world. We embarked on the ship on the 1st of February. We had all sorts of issues with COVID, but we got away with it. We got a COVID-free ship, and we've been out here now, I guess, coming up to a month and a half. We've been through some big old storms in the Southern Ocean. We've been through temperatures of -30 and below in Antarctica, but it's been a heck of an experience. And the good news is we're coming home with those all-important pictures and other data about the shipwreck that are flying around the world, that millions of people have been sharing and enjoying over the last 24 hours.
Was it getting to the point where you thought you might not find it?
Embarrassingly, yes. I'm an optimist, but I have to say I was like giving up. But luckily, I'm not in charge of the subsea diving, and they didn't give up, and they kept going. And you know, it's funny because Shackleton's motto is, through endurance, we conquer. And they at the back endured. They endured everything. They had much harder than I did. They were working around the clock. They were working outdoors in the sub-zero temperatures, getting covered in water and sea spray, frost and snow. and they endured. They absolutely never gave up. And then, sure enough, they conquered.
And there you have it. The story of Shackleton's expeditions, the Shackleton's whiskey that was left for 100 years in the ice until it was discovered again. And then going back to the Endurance expedition, the vessel was found earlier this year. I mean, this is amazing. This is a fascinating story. And so someone mentioned the Endurance audiobook. Absolutely. If you're subscribed to Audible or another audiobook source, the audiobook is fantastic. There's a bunch of other books written about it. I mean, this is literally one of my favorite stories, just because Jack London wrote a lot about the wild, Call of the Wild and White Fang and all these outdoor kind of boyhood adventure stories. This is a real adventure survival story. This Shackleton who made 4 expeditions to the South Pole, to Antarctica, who got stranded on an ice floe for months on end, for 7-8 months, who then sails a little 20-foot makeshift sailboat through 900 miles of hurricane and freezing water and bad weather, has to climb up 200-foot, 2,000-foot ice cliffs, go over 5,000-foot mountains on foot in deep snow to get somewhere. He has to find people to take him to try to rescue the people he left behind in Antarctica. He has to do it 4 times and he fails 4 times. His 5th time he's successful and he brings them. You can't write movies like this. You can't write scripts like this. Nobody would believe it. It would be utter crap and it would fail as a miserable, just sort of lame attempt at an action movie. But truth is stranger than fiction. This is the Shackleton story. 2 of his expeditions we talked about today, the Endurance expedition and the 1907 expedition that left this delicious whiskey. Well, not this delicious whiskey behind, but this is really amazing. We're going to wrap up here real quick, but for those of you that haven't hit the like button, there's 706 of you currently watching this, 575 likes. So if you haven't hit the like button, if you've been here more than 30 seconds, you clearly like this. So, go ahead, hit that like button. Please, let's get up to, we can get up to 700 likes in the next 1 minute. If you all just reach down there, I know you don't think about doing it much, but it really means a lot to creators if you hit that like button, because that engages YouTube. It lets them know that people are watching this. So I would deeply appreciate if you would take literally half a second out of your life and hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I would deeply appreciate your subscription. We've got 32,093. We've gained back 2 of the 25 we lost overnight. So if you haven't subscribed, I hope you would do me the honor of subscribing to my channel. I think you'll like it. This is what we talk about. We talk about this and other law tangent and law related things. Haas Knuckles says, morning, Jeff. Morning, Haas. You're going to enjoy this story if you haven't been enjoying it already. Dorland Shepherd, why does the Antarctic Preservation Treaty exist? Basically, they don't want people fucking with Antarctica. It's it's a non-political part of the earth. It's largely unexplored. It's untouched territory. They don't want people coming in and messing with it, basically. And so it's there. Whatever's there is there. You don't touch it. You don't put anything there. You don't take anything. You don't take anything out that is there already. So it's just a treaty to preserve Antarctica for what it is. Grant G, I'm a little behind, but if they got bottles in 2010 and the original stuff was barreled for 15 years, how could they be selling the recreated one already? It hasn't been 15 years. Did I miss something? Well, the whiskey that they were using was already aged appropriately. And that you'll get there when they talk about that. They happen to find a 1 barrel that was dated from 19. What was it? The barrel 1907 that had been aged sufficiently, where they made that original deal. Now they just use existing barrels to do this. The barrels, and they blend it together properly and appropriately to recreate the taste. And I really, really wish I would have got my hands on one of those original 50,000 bottles, because this 40% alcohol bottle is really, really good. I'm honestly genuinely surprised that it's this good for the price point it's at. I would love it's 40%, and I would love to have tasted the 47.3 version of this. That would be fantastic. I recommend this whiskey. This Shackleton whiskey is actually really, really good. I'm surprised. I had low hopes for it, but I enjoy it. Rob the Pan became a YouTube member. Welcome to our YouTube membership. I didn't see which level you had joined. Where are you? Oh, you were a member of the Clean and Sober crew. Welcome to the Clean and Sober crew. And again, we were 647 likes. We only need 53 more to get us up to the goal of 700. So 53 of you I know have not to hit that like button. So go ahead and do that. And just about 10 minutes from now, the super skier trial will be starting. So we got to wrap this up pretty quick. What are we looking at here? The last few super chats, which are always I'm just gratefully appreciate everybody that does. You're a good storyteller, Jeffy. I'm not really telling the story. I'm just kind of commenting on other people telling the story. You know, let someone else do the heavy lifting for me. I'll just do the drinking while I wait. But I love this. And as I said at the beginning, next week we're going to be doing part 2 of the Shackleton story. Next week we're going to be doing a 1.5 hour long documentary watch party. So the chances of it getting copyright claimed are really super high, but we're going to do it anyway because I think it's such a damn cool story. So any additional, super chat support you can give me next week would be greatly appreciated, but not required. I can live without it, but just, if you're feeling particularly generous, just realize I'm not going to get any ad revenue out of it. So next week will be this 1 hour and 37 minute documentary narrated by Irishman Liam Neeson about Irishman Shackleton's expedition. It gets into some really cool details. And because they have audio of the people involved, people that were on that expedition, you will hear them tell the story in their own voices. It's a fantastic documentary, and I don't care about monetization because I want to share the documentary with you. You'll enjoy the story. Next, Super Sapien Underground. Wow, someone should write a poem about that. She says, you should do that. You should write a longer poem, at least, 3 or 4 stanzas long. Write a big Shackleton poem for us. That would be cool. And I think nope, we got one more from Haas Knuckles. I have one of the only 1,500 bottles of Glenfiddich Mr. Porter Collab 20-year single malt, waiting until my wife and I have our first child to open it. Remember me when you have your first child. I'll still be here. Just saying, I'm here. Damn, not my man, Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson is narrating next week's story. All right, what do we got coming up for the rest of the week? Tomorrow, we're going to be catching up on our super chats and the drinks I owe you. I'm not going to try. I was thinking about drinking the Shackleton thing, but I'm not. That's really good. I'm not going to waste that. That's actually really, really good. Stingy says, imagine they sampled the one piss and reseal the whiskey bottle prank. 100-year setup. And then, vanilla, orange, honey, cinnamon. Yeah, that would be good. I like there's some of the things like me. So, all right. Tomorrow we're going to be catching up. I owe you 15 drinks and a shit ton of super chats. I either didn't read or have no memory of reading from the drunk stream last Friday. So that's what we'll be doing tomorrow. But we'll also be providing an important update on the Taylor Shabusiness corpse and mutilation and self-gratification with the severed parts of her boyfriend lover case tomorrow. Wednesday. I can't remember what we're doing Wednesday. What are we doing Wednesday? Sovereign citizens. We're going to be doing what are sovereign citizens and what do they believe? And we're going to be reading from their little pamphlet, the trial survival guide or the trial survivor kit or whatever the hell they call it. so that you can find out a little bit more about them, and you can compare that to what Darrell Brooks was doing during his trial, and you can see how he was drawing heavily from the sovereign citizen deal. Thursday, as always, O.J. Simpson. This week, Mark Furman coming up. We've got about 2 or 3 more weeks of Mark Furman, and then we're going to move on to Dennis Fung, the failed LA County criminologist, and he's going to get destroyed by defense lawyer Barry Scheck. Sapien Underground not paying another 30 the share of that. To share that? What do you? I don't know what you're talking about. Corn Pup says, Ari, the Cummings trial. I emailed with Nicole Moss on Friday. She said she will be bringing up the misidentification of the gun/sloppy crime scene in closing arguments. You're emailing Nicole Moss? Cool. Okay. Edward Lockwood says, thanks, Jeff, and chat. Bye, all. Now, again, on your we've at 683 likes. I got to go here in like 2 minutes. We need 17 more likes. Yeah, 17 more likes to get to 700. Hit that like button. 17 of you just reach down there and slap that like button so we can get out of here. And hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button so that you get notifications of what's coming on. And we'll see you there. Kurt, thank you so much for being in chat. It's always a pleasure to have you. Love you, brother. You take care of yourself. Do what you need to do. We got you. You're part of the crew. Ride or die crew with Kurt. Flux, please have a special person on Wednesday. We're talking to that special person, and I told you who that special person was. So yeah, we're talking with the special person to see if she will be on. Yes, there's like a 50% clue who it would be. We'll see. All right, we 704 likes. You guys rock. I can get the hell out of here. We're gonna leave it here. Thank you, mods, for taking care of everybody today. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you that have this playing on in the background as you drive across America, as you do your work, as you work overnight, as you just cruise around in your cars doing whatever, I appreciate it so much. Share the video with your friends. Let them know we're here. Continue to do this legal vices stuff. The Lorax is saying he loves you. Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow for more adventures, super chats, drunken stream, and Taylor Shabusiness. Don't forget to enjoy your legal vices. Bye now.